So, welcome to this Sunday evening rant. Haven't had a chance to do this so far today. Now, a number of you will have seen a picture of this on the social media feeds. The surprise Christmas present. Well, it is kind of a surprise in that I actually know what it is, but you don't. So let me give you a couple of minutes or a minute or so of telling you why this surprise present turned up. A few weeks ago, I did a mailbag, and one of the tubers who responded to that particular mailbag said something along the lines of, what about Nord and Ensoniq and a couple of other brands? And why don't we look at those on the channel? And the answer, honestly, is that I haven't really expanded my horizons, I suppose, to some of the other brands that are out there. Now, I don't get on with the two Nord machines that I've played with in the past. I haven't really got on with. So, basically, unless I find one of those boards very, very cheap, the likelihood of it turning up on the channel is probably pretty limited. However, after that particular video was done, I received an email. And I received an email from somebody in Europe saying that they had this keyboard and would I like it? So I of course wrote back and said, "Oh, do you mean for free?" They said no. So I said, well, if it's not free, then I'm not interested. Then they turned around and they said, well, I'll accept this amount of money for it, which I thought was fairly reasonable, actually, to be honest, and fairly cheap. So I said, yes, I will pay you that amount of money for this, and this turned up just before Christmas. I'm not going to endow you with an unboxing video, because that's not what I'm doing about this. I have got the Stanley knife. I will now open this up and show you what the special Christmas present was. So here we have the mystery or surprise Christmas present. Can you guess what it is yet? I have to admit, the person who sent it to me wrapped it in enough bubble wrap, bin bags and cardboard that I could probably build a small town and furnish it with bubble wrap. But that'd be another conversation. So this is an Ensoniq EPS 16. This is a digital sampling keyboard from around 1990. And I'll tell you a bit about Ensoniq, or about as much as I know about Ensoniq at the moment. So let me just put this to one side so I can refer to my notes. I don't know much about Ensoniq products, so I'll put that on the table now. So this is kind of what I know at the moment, before I start doing sort of lots more research into them. Ensoniq as a company was formed in Pennsylvania, US of A, in 1982, and they actually were not formed to make synthesizers. They were actually formed by a bunch of ex-Commodore engineers who were really looking to make the next big computer. That's kind of where what the company was set up to. So 1982, height of the personal computer boom. Everybody in the world had a Commodore 64 or a ZX Spectrum or a whole horde of Ataris and Oryx and God, I'm trying to think about some of the new brain. I can remember called BBC Model B. God knows, there was a lot of personal computers around at the time. That was the explosion in the personal computer market. So that's what this company was formed to do. It was formed to make a computer. probably along the same lines as the Commodore 64, where they exited from Commodore. Unfortunately, the first project for the company was actually to make a computer keyboard for the Atari, the Atari that was coming out at that point in time. Unfortunately, in 1983, the games consoles started to fall from favour. So before the computer boom, you had the games consoles. So the Atari 2600, if anybody ever remembers that. And they started to fall from favour. People were moving to the personal computer market. This project was for the latest Atari gaming console that never saw the light of day. The project was cancelled. There followed legal action involving Atari and Commodore, and it's kind of resulted in the company changing its name from whatever it was at the time to what we now know as Ensoniq. And they produced their first synthesizer out of that debacle. So the sort of debacle forced them down a route. They were developing a keyboard for the Atari. I suppose it was some sort of music program they were trying to develop for the Atari. That all fell through. Along comes the first keyboard. The company itself, unfortunately, has long since died. So it sort of carried on going till about 1997, and in 1997, for one reason or another, it was bought by Creative Technology, them of the Sound Blaster fame, merged with another acquisition they had made around that point in time, which was EMU Systems, very famous for the emulator, if anybody remembers that, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, that keyboard he's playing, Emulator 2. So the two companies were merged together, and they went on to produce two keyboards based on existing technology. Effectively, what they were producing was the keyboard version of the Proteus rack unit. I think it's the Proteus rack unit. They carried on in this sort of merged format as a subsidiary of Creative Labs until 2002. And in 2002, the company, or the division within Creative Labs, was disbanded. End of story. Why did Ensoniq fail? Well, this is the first Ensoniq keyboard I've ever owned. So I am only surmising why Ensoniq failed based on some of the comments on some of the user groups that I've read in the last few days. Build quality was poor. Some of their earlier units, the build quality was abysmal, apparently. They had lots of quality issues with the keyboards themselves, in terms of not only the actual physical build of the keyboard, but in terms of the software that was loaded onto the keyboard. They had lots of issues with that in the early keyboards. And they kind of lacked, at that point in time, manufacturers, or the bigger manufacturers like Roland and Korg, etc., were doing a keyboard and a rack for that keyboard. So using the M1 as a prime example, the M1 and the M1 rack, the Triton rack, you get the drift. Roland D50, D550, MKS20, RD piano, you get the drift. That's what the manufacturers were doing at the time. So they only offered either a keyboard, or tended to offer only a keyboard, not the modular. I mean, there was for the EPS16, there was something called the EPS16 something or other, and I can't remember what it was called, but that was actually a rack mount of this keyboard. But in most of the other keyboards they produced, it was just a keyboard. And they had, because they were a small company, they were probably working from hand to mouth in terms of the keyboards they were pushing out, they struggled to keep up with the R&D of the big boys. So the bigger manufacturers were moving ahead quite rapidly at that point in time in terms of keyboard technology, and they just had an inability to keep up with that. And then they changed their focus from keyboards to computer cards, which is probably the reason why Creative Technologies bought them in the end, because of the Sound Blaster sort of kind of concept. Because they saw that there was more profit in the computer cards than there was in producing one of these things. So this is, as I said, an EPS 16 Plus, and I will do a proper video on this shortly. But one of the things I can say about it, having played with this, these keys are really, really loose, and they got a horrible noise to them. I'm not sure that's coming across on the microphone. Hang on. Can you hear that? I've never come across a keyboard, but I have cheap keyboards with that kind of sound. Brought to the market in 1990. And as I said, there was already a rack mount of the same unit. It's a 16-bit sampler as opposed to the S50, which was a couple of years earlier, which was a 12-bit sampler. So the sort of sampling technology has moved on to now 16-bit. It was capable of sampling at rates between 1.2 kilohertz and 44.16 kilohertz. So according to the stats, you can get about, if you sampled at 44.6, you would get a total of 11 seconds of sampling. Now that's 11 seconds of sampling across all the samples. So you can have one sample that runs for 11 seconds, or you can have multiple samples that add up to 11 seconds. Comes by default with that's 1 meg, not gig, meg of RAM. Can be expanded to 2 meg of RAM by adding another memory cartridge in it, apparently. I have no idea what this has got on it, so we'll find out. And that is pretty much all I know about this thing. As I said, I haven't turned it on yet. I haven't plugged it in. I've no idea. I mean, I was assured it did work. It's a bit grubby. It's a bit yellow. And it has definitely seen a few bits of wars. There's most of the what do you call it? The overlays, screen printing, has been damaged on this. It's not in particularly great nick, but then again, I didn't pay particularly great money for it, so we can see what happens with this. It might not be a stayer, it might be a goer, have to be honest, but we'll give it a good clean and see what it has to offer. So there you go. The special Christmas present was this EPS 16 Plus, and there'll be videos coming shortly about how this thing works, and probably after a damn good clean. So this is the last rant of the year, so I'll see you on the other side. Bye bye for now. If you liked the content of the video you've just seen, please give it a thumbs up. It just helps the YouTube algorithm with its selection process. If you want to leave a comment, please feel free to do that as well. Down below somewhere should be the ability to do that. I do try to respond to all the comments that are raised on the channel. Sometimes it takes me a few weeks because of what I'm doing, and I'm getting more and more comments and questions raised on the channel, so it just takes sometimes a little bit of time to do a bit of research. If you want to be notified when I put more rants, mailbergs and videos about this sort of legacy tech and even modern tech on the channel, hit the subscribe button, hit that bell icon, and you'll be notified by YouTube when stuff happens. I try to publish at least 2 times a week, sometimes more, sometimes less. Until next time, bye bye.